Isaiah 1:18. Come, let us reason together, says the Lord. Isaiah 1:18. Right. If anything has become apparent in the last dozen or so years, it's that we Americans have lost the ability to talk. We have a tough time sharing opinions that are different, reasoning together. Don't like a liberal opinion? Pull out the term bleeding heart or snowflake. Don't like a conservative opinion? Call the person an ideologue. Too big a word? Try wingnut. After all, the way to win an argument is to simply kill the messenger, right? To demonstrate that the person who is arguing is somehow unworthy to say anything of worth at all. A whiner, insensitive, elitist, hack. Which, of course, is made all the easier when the snowflake or the wingnut is on the other side of the computer screen and thus a little less likely to voice their disapproval of your assessment of them by grabbing you by the nose. We've lost the ability to talk. And part of it's because we've lost the ability to understand the components of a sound argument. For example, we forget that the highly subjective idea of the worthiness, toughness, tenderheartedness, hard-heartedness, etc. of the messenger has nothing to do with the soundness of an argument. What's a sound argument? Well, Martin P. Golding, Legal Reasoning, Broadview Press, 2001, a formally valid argument, and he's getting a little bit into the forms of argument. We're not going to drag into that today. A formally valid argument that has true premises is said to be a sound argument. Okay, here's an example. All tigers are mammals. No mammals are creatures with scales. Therefore, no tigers are creatures with scales. Back to Martin. In debate or discussion, therefore, an argument may be attacked in two ways: by attempting to show that one of the premises is false, or by attempting to show that it is invalid. On the other hand, if one concedes the truth of the premises of a formally valid argument, one also must concede the truth of the conclusion or be guilty of irrationality. Now note, this means that if the worst human being you could imagine, if a person you disagree with in every other instance, if the person you think this human race would be far better off without follows these rules, then their argument can still be sound. And if you're going to show they're wrong, you have to show why one or more of the building blocks of the argument is flawed. For example, if they say all basketballs are round, the earth is round, therefore the earth is a basketball, you got a pretty good shot at showing that their reasoning is less than complete. But the point, my point, their argument is not rendered unworthy because we think they're a snowflake or a wingnut. That is not an answer. Their argument is not them. It's an argument. So why can't we hear it? Well, the first and obvious answer is we don't listen. And it's true. We have developed a habit, even in the midst of debate, of not listening to counterpoints, but merely sitting there figuring out what we're going to say next. And this problem has been compounded by a tendency to believe that whoever is loudest in an argument or scariest must be right. But I think the problem lies deeper. And it's a problem Jesus addresses in today's lesson. It's a problem of recognizing the worth of our neighbor. We are presented with an incredible picture today. It was common courtesy, if one could afford it, to have a servant wash the feet of those who traveled to visit with a household. The roads they had traveled, of course, were dusty or maybe filled with mud, and animals of burden had deposited far more than dirt in those same roads. The sandals of those who could afford them, well, they were hardly Gucci. So washing the feet of the visitor, feet that were likely disgusting from travel, was considered a great kindness, a soothing, refreshing kindness, and it was a job reserved for a slave. But in a Jewish household, as we are often reminded on Maundy Thursday, it had to be the job of a non-Jewish slave. And now, we are faced with this picture of Jesus stripping down for work and washing the feet of the disciples, washing the feet of those called to serve him, and it freaks him out. Just like it freaks us out when we hear him say, "Do this for one another." Because he's not just talking about washing feet. He's talking about treating one another like we are the servants of one another. Every generation has those who package reasons to disregard, ignore, belittle, and dehumanize others. Sometimes folks do this out of ignorance. Sometimes they do it to their own advantage. But when you regard others as lesser, well, why should you have to listen to them? They're a fill in the blank. And oddly, some of us who cry the loudest for Jesus engage in exactly this behavior, forgetting that Jesus said the greatest of all must be the servant of all. And if you're going to be a servant, if you're going to value someone so much that you serve them, wouldn't you at least listen to them? Think about the people who have meant the most to you. What have they done for you? I'll bet one of those things is they listened. And if they didn't, I'll bet there's a hole in your heart, a hole created by the longing that they would have. Jesus gets on his knees and washes the feet of his people. He assumes the ultimate position of humility. It's so radical, Peter protests, and it's only when Peter realizes that this is part of the price of being with Jesus that he allows it. Knowing this, I ask you, if Jesus could bow and wash the dust, the dirt, the excrement off the feet of his followers, the ones who should have been washing his feet, how can we not listen to our neighbor? Listen, not just sit there as we ignore them pretending to listen, but listen. Years ago, at the end of the 1980s, the Palestinians and the Jews hit a spot where they were probably closer to peace than they sadly are now. And in a meeting of village leaders, one of the Palestinians said, "My dreams cannot come true." And he looked at the Jewish leaders and he said, "Your dreams cannot come true." What he was saying, in effect, was that the reality of the world was bigger than him and bigger than his dreams, bigger than solely the dreams of his opponents. That they needed to leave the dreams that they had cherished individually behind and find a dream that could be shared. A new dream had to be found. And it still does. In a land reeling from terror in schools, incredible inequity in wealth, racial tensions, renewed concern about nuclear arms, concern about habitat loss and climate change, we need answers. And answers only come when we listen. And listening only comes when we choose not to dismiss others and instead care. Jesus sits before us washing our feet. Jesus sits before us, and the message is clear. Not caring, not an option.